Hey, welcome back to the Cash PT Lunch Hour podcast. This is Aaron LeBauer, your host. And today my special guest is Nicole Cozean. And Nicole joins me all the way from California. And she's here because she not only rocked it at PT BizCon, but she's been doing some great stuff for the pelvic community and dealing with the whole coronavirus and closing down her business and reopening it. So I wanted to get her on here to share with you what she's doing. So Nicole, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. I know so much has happened since BizCon. It's kind of crazy.
Yep.
And but let's talk about it because I'm an open book and it's been really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's, every decision is like 10,000 little decisions after that, So of course.
Yeah. Yeah. It was nuts. We finished up PT BizCon and I think it was Friday, Saturday. And then I got done with strategy calls and all closing it down and doing everything. And at 4:00 on Sunday, I took Jake to the airport and I went home, grilled out, spent time with my kids for the first time in a week and a half. And at 9:30 that night, my wife and I finally had time to sit down and talk about, are we actually seeing patients Monday morning? And we weren't, but we made that decision at 9:30 at night on Sunday.
Yeah. And over here too in California, it's so interesting how different everything is regionally also, because I think it's hitting all of us at different times. Mm-hmm. And we had an instance in California where our Orange County, which for those of you guys who don't know, Orange County is halfway between Los Angeles and San Diego. So our county stuff actually sent out, and I don't really know if it was a mistake or something. They sent out the stay-at-home order like 3 days before California did. Mm-hmm. And it was really confusing. And so then California was saying, no, Orange County rescinded it. Wow. So we shut down for a day. And then we were like, oh, just kidding. Again, hindsight's 2020, because we didn't really get what was going to end up happening. Mm-hmm. And so then we were like, okay, well, back in the clinic, it's okay. And then boom, on that Thursday, then California had the stay-at-home order. And so then we had to shut down right again. So it was just so nuts. And I think the biggest challenge in all of this stuff is just working with imperfect information. Mm-hmm. And you don't have all of it. And for us, number one, PTs who are kind of control freaks and try to think about everything from 8 million steps ahead, we just don't have that much information, we just don't have as much information as we need to. And we're making decisions with just the best information that we have at the time and just trying to roll with it,
Right. So here, let's go back and remind everyone, I think you came in on, I just had to look it up, episode 86. So it was last summer.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So first we're 120 or something like that. I don't know, 130. So it's been a while, but so you've got a practice in California. It's mostly a pelvic PT practice. You've got 5 or 6 other employees and therapists. Can you give us a quick rundown on?
Yeah, quick rundown. So I first started at a hospital-based clinic, grew a pelvic floor program there for 5 years, worked at an outpatient physical therapy, smaller pelvic health-based clinic. There was the clinical director there, and then broke off about 4 years ago to start my own clinic. It's called Pelvic Sanity. We treat men and women with pelvic health conditions all over the place. So in 3 years, we had grown to, I think, 5 physical therapists, 5 PTs, 2 front desk, another admin, and a massage therapist. So 9 total people. And then we built that to a 7-figure cash PT revenue business, which is pretty friggin' awesome in not short of a time. So we'll see how it continues to go. And, and we never thought that at our 4-year anniversary, we would be shut down.
Right. When was your 4-year anniversary? What was the date?
So technically, so we have kind of 2, but basically mid-April. So April 15th, we kind of picked as our date.
Yeah. So April 15th, no patients coming in the doors.
No patients, 0. And all of our employees were furloughed at that time. And it was it was actually really scary, right? Because it's at that point, we didn't know. We'd been closed down for 4 weeks, and we didn't know what the future of Pelvic Sanity was gonna hold. I didn't know if it was gonna come back to its previous level. I still we have an inkling now that yes, it will, but we still don't 100% know how it's gonna look, in 6 months. So
let's go back March. What was the timeline? When was that San Diego stay-at-home order? When was the California one? And when did you guys?
oh gosh, the actual date I can look, but it was like mid-March. So I think it was like March 18th, if I remember correctly. And, you know, at that point, APTA hadn't really come out yet with anything that they were saying. So it was all kind of up to us about, and in our area, Los Angeles wasn't quite a hot spot, but there definitely had rising numbers. You know, Orange County had rising numbers. Seattle on our side of the country had been kind of a hot spot. So it was definitely really, really scary. And we kind of knew that coronavirus was around, and obviously PT BizCon had been canceled at that point. And
well, we moved from in-person to virtual.
Oh, wow. No, did not cancel. Right. But we had just gotten back from, not too long ago, less than a month before, we were at CSM,
right.
So it was like such a hard pivot to like, whoa, wait, what the heck's going on? And it was a little scary, but when the week of the closure, the actual stay-at-home order, the scary part for us was that we had tons of patients just calling to cancel. And that's when we were really like, oh, dang, like we weren't freaking out as much, I think, because, we're healthcare providers. We kind of get universal precautions and what a virus is and like how it was being transmitted at that point. And so for us, we were just like, oh, going along our days. And then all of a sudden it was like the fear of everybody and the anxiety of everything. And that's what really, I think, caused Jesse and I, and for those of you guys don't know, I run the business with my husband. We were like, oh shit, like this is a big deal, because I think we dropped in like a couple of days till basically like 30 to 40% of for our normal patient load. And that's like a huge drop over just some stuff on the news, right? I mean, there wasn't actually a stay-at-home order yet. Nothing had been actually happening, but, and of course it was to come a couple days later, but that's what was really scary. It was like, gosh, the fragility of just the stability of our minds around everything was like, oh my gosh, like people are really scared, and they were canceling.
So they called to cancel before, and in droves before you guys even considered having to close.
Yeah. I mean, we had talked a little bit about like, oh, what's going to happen? And then at that point too, right, there was no PPP loan. There was no talks of anything like that. So then we were kind of like, okay, as a business owner, and we have a responsibility to our employees. Okay. Like we've planned for, of course, not a global pandemic, but we've planned for things where we wouldn't be bringing in money and maybe we would need to still continue to pay people's salaries. But then it was like, well, that's great if we have an end date, like, but we couldn't as an employer. I also couldn't promise and shell out our biggest expense, which is payroll, without the certainty that there was going to be ever patients coming back in, or how long that was going to be. And so when we went home and then we didn't sleep for like days, because we were going through all of the permutations of what could happen and what just balancing the tension between our responsibility to our patients, the responsibility to our employees as an employer, and then also the social responsibility of everything was really like a tough, we didn't make the decision to close lightly, but at the end of the day, we decided, especially when then California came down with the statewide stay-at-home order, then it was a lot easier when almost the decision was made for us to be like, you know what, let's just push pause right now.
But legally, you could have been seeing patients, right?
100%, and we had talked about that. And this is where, gosh, it's so different regionally, right? It is, and I believe that physical therapy, I agree that it is an essential service and that we're really important. But for me personally, we decided that the social responsibility of us closing when there was so much uncertainty about the numbers and whether or not we were the whole point was to flatten the curve, right? So if to us, I've always walked around too saying like, well, pelvic PT isn't an emergency. And, while we're important, is it really like necessary in the face of crazy uncertainty
Right.
that we stay open for that time. So what we chose to do was basically shut down in 2-week increments
Mm-hmm.
so that we could assess, so that it wasn't a day-to-day fluctuation for anybody, our patients, our staff, and frankly us, because at that point we were just like, we just need to make a decision and stick with it.
Right. Right.
Because I cannot keep doing this, like, are we open, are we closed, are we open, are we closed type of thing. So we ended up deciding to close in 2-week increments. And at that point, the stay-at-home order was for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But then as it got extended, and we can talk about this here in a second, but as it got extended, we still chose to close the clinic in 2-week increments. So going back to the essential conversation, you know, I believe that pelvic PT is really, really, really important. But at that point in time, I sort of took it to be essential PT was people that were in the hospital or cleaning, you know, not cleaning, making sure clearing beds, not cleaning,
Right.
clearing beds and making sure that people that were in the hospital could go home safely and stuff like that. That's what I sort of interpreted essential to be at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I know that, and I do not, if you chose to stay open during that time, then freaking more power to you. Like it was such an individual decision, I think, that none of us should be judging anybody else for what we decided to do during these like unprecedented
Right.
times. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult. And I think for me, a big factor was the other people that work for me, because I'm now somewhat responsible for them as their employer. You know, how does it impact not just my employees, but the people in the community and city and et cetera, and my family, right? I mean, there's a lot of too many factors. Was there, I mean, that was like one of the hardest decisions I had to make, you know. What was there anything else that went into your decision to close? Did you actually close completely? Did you do telehealth?
So, okay, good question. So we closed for in-person visits, but then the logistics of actually deciding that we were actually going to furlough our employees came when we did find out that there was the extra stimulus for $600 on top of whatever they would have gotten for unemployment. So when we balanced out what we would be able to guarantee them in patient hours, right? So we still had some volume of patients that would be there. We couldn't guarantee everybody the same thing, and we didn't want to piecemeal things together at that point. And with the extra stimulus, it was actually not going to be a huge blow for them at that time, as long as it was going to be a relatively short period of time. So, but that was crazy too, because we didn't know anything about that, you know, so we had to like go and research all the things so that when we went to our employees, we actually had facts, and that we really do think, you guys, that this is the best decision for you right now. And, you know, explaining the difference between, you know, truly a layoff versus being furloughed. Like, you're still employees of Pelvic Sanity. We fully intend for you guys to come back 100% at the capacity, but right now we can't guarantee like patient hours and that kind of stuff. So it is best for a consistency standpoint for you guys to just take that and get unemployment for the time being. And then we just kept in close contact with our employees throughout the whole time. But that was really, but here's the thing, right? So, but when they can't work for us then if we decide to do that. So that was the thing. We tried to gauge like the percentage of people that we felt like could move to telehealth to see, do we actually have the patient volume to promise and guarantee hours? And at that point, we just I didn't feel confident in that. So
it's like so for instance, let's say you're seeing 100 patient visits a week. You're thinking, well, we got maybe 20, 30 of those visits, but I've got 5 employees, and maybe I could keep one on to do the telehealth, but it's probably, they'd be seeing 5 of everyone else's patients. And it was just like,
from a cohesive standpoint, and pelvic health is a little bit different too. It's not like just your knee. And then, you know, the other challenge too, right, is that when we've marketed and prided ourselves on being, and you know this, manual-based physical therapy, to all of a sudden not only pivot on our patients to, oh yeah, by the way, like, because we know it's valuable, but they don't necessarily, we haven't educated them on how valuable it is. So that was going to be a challenge. So that was still uncertain at that time. And then also, just to be completely frank, like, there is a big learning curve with doing stuff online. Now, I've been doing that kind of stuff for a couple of years with remote consultations and remote coaching. but my staff hasn't. And so to also think about the training aspect that was going to have to go, there for pivoting to everybody to telehealth, taking the time, taking the money without any patient revenue coming in at that point to train, then that was not a good calculus of what we wanted to be doing with our time and with our money. And so we ended up deciding to furlough everybody at that point. And then I was the one who sort of took everybody's patients that wanted to go to telehealth on. So that's what we chose to do at that time.
Yeah. So how long did that last? Are you still doing that? Is everyone back? Are your employees back, or are people off furlough? How'd that
work? So excellent question.
Well,
I know so much now.
I have some practice at doing
all
this.
Of the things. So what we ended up doing, right? So we couldn't really technically, you can't really talk to them and have them be working on anything at that point. So we did have a couple of just Zoom calls as happy hours to just sort of hey, how is everybody doing? And then just give a little clinic update. And my conversion rate, if you will, to telehealth, frankly, kind of sucked. It, just to be completely honest with everybody, it was about 15% of patients and almost nobody in the first couple of weeks. It ended up being around week 3 and 4 of being closed. I think everybody was kind of oh, wait, I can't continue on. I am in pain and I do need help, and I do need some help to decide what I'm going to be doing during this time. So that's when the remote consultations or the telehealth consultations from our current patients started to pick up. What was interesting though is, and this is something that just in a telehealth conversation is sort of interesting, is that, I actually saw an increase in people seeking me out just for a remote coaching, remote consultations, just outside of my current patients. And I think what ends up happening is that telehealth, whether or not you practice through your state or do coaching, remote coaching and stuff, it gets to be a little bit more competitive because now you're competing with everybody in California or people that do coaching like I do outside. And so it's so people, I think, were thinking so say they have interstitial cystitis, right, which is a condition that I wrote a book on. So now they can't see their local PT. So why wouldn't they then seek out kind of an expert in the field during this time? So we actually saw an increase in that, which I felt was sort of interesting, And I think ultimately our messaging to our patients was very much, we intend to be back in the clinic in a couple of weeks. So we didn't really, quote unquote, push telehealth until we were kind of ooh, this is going to last a little bit longer. And then we sort of did a little bit of education on what we could actually do during a telehealth session. And then we did see a bit of an increase for our current patients that did convert there. So we ended up probably with about more 15 to 20%, but still not a huge increase.
Are you guys seeing people in person right now this week?
So our official open date was May. This month is May. May 18th.
May. It's all blurred together.
Yeah, totally. It's I don't even know where, what's going on. So, our official reopen date was May 18th. We actually did decide to open up for a kind of a select few number of patients the week prior to make sure that we could fulfill on all of our COVID policies and sort of do almost like a dry run with patients in the clinic, and all of that. So we did have a few patients in the clinic last week, and even a couple the latter part of the week prior to that. Yeah. And so then restaggering people. So we didn't have everybody come back all at once. We actually had a person come back a couple of weeks before we were going to see patients, mostly then at that point because we had gotten, thankfully, the PPP loan. So we could, pay her for non-revenue generating sorts of things to do, with a little bit more cushion of okay, that will probably be a forgiven expense if we can do all of the calculations on all of the rules on that. So we had her come back first, and then we had her treat patients for a week. And then we have next person coming back a week later from that. And then we have our next person coming back a week later from that. And then our next person will come back hopefully a week or two after that.
Mm-hmm. Did your admin staff all go furloughed as well, or did you keep anyone on?
Yeah, we did furlough our admin staff as well, but then we brought her back the same time we brought our first PT back, because there's a ton of work to be done with reaching back out to patients and calling people. And then we had also, in digital marketing and digital media, right, you ask your audience, like, what do they want? What do they need? So we took a little bit out of that playbook, and we actually asked our patients, we had them write answer a survey and say, are you comfortable coming back? Just so we could kind of gauge our volume, because we see, almost between 120 and 140 patient visits a week when we're hopping with all 5 people. So I kind of wanted to gauge, like, are we going to have 50%? Are there still going to be people that aren't comfortable? Like, so we did surveys. We also used it as a little bit of pre-framing for, hey, these are some of the policies. Are you comfortable with those policies, right? We'll be wearing masks. Do you have a mask? Kind of a thing to wear. So that we ended up getting back on that survey, like about a 70% rate of people that were saying, yes, in about a couple of weeks, I'll be quote unquote ready to come back. So knowing that, so then knowing that, then we can sort of plan. And that's how we ended up deciding how to plan the return of our people. It sounds so dramatic.
So you brought them in like one at a time.
Yeah.
So what are go ahead.
We've only had, so there's over the last, since we've been open for, 2.5 weeks kind of, we've only had one patient slot that we couldn't fill. So far, I know.
That's awesome. And is everyone back?
Not yet. We have one person coming next week, and then one more, hopefully like the week or two after that.
Okay.
But their schedules are already getting full. So we're already scheduling those people.
Oh, awesome.
Appointments. Yeah.
Awesome. What were some of the policies and procedures you guys are using to reopen?
Good question. Gosh, this was also, there's no we had like what some other clinic owners were doing and stuff like that. And we obviously look at like what the CDC and the WHO recommend, but it's kind of all over the map, frankly. Right. And so from an outpatient PT perspective, we decided to, obviously we have masks. So we all have our masks, and then we are having patients wear masks. Some of the more difficult decisions we had to make, especially for a public PT clinic, is that we have a bathroom in office, and we only have one sink without the bathroom. And so we actually decided to close the in-office bathroom from a cleaning purposes, and just to add an extra sink for us to go back and wash our hands more frequently. And our patients have been pretty good with that, actually. There's a public restroom that's not too far away, but they have to go outside of the clinic for that. So that was one of the things that we were like really worried about, being a pelvic health clinic, not to have that for people. But everyone's been really cool and just really understanding that we just have to make these sacrifices right now, And then so we have 15-minute increments in between each patient to clean. We don't let people stay in the waiting room. We're not allowing children in, which was a big business decision as well, because a lot of people are having childcare issues right now because their kids are all home. But we didn't want any, so our policy is basically that if you are walking, you can't come in here as a kid. You have to be in your little baby carrier and stay in there. So yeah, those are some of the policies.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Is there someone in the physical therapy world that should have been putting out these policies, or is it really just up to us? Because are we that smart, right?
Right. You know what? I think this is one of the, and I said this, I forget where I was saying it, maybe on the huddle, but the APTA wrote like a guideline principle of like what essential is and everything like that. And, on their part, I think it was brilliant, right? Because it didn't say anything about, it didn't give us actually any guidance. And you compare that with the American Dental Association, for instance, that actually mandated and said, and even the massage therapy board right now is saying, you are not allowed to open until whatever phase thing, like we actually wanted our massage therapist back because she's basically doing the same things that we are with that in the one-on-one treatment room. And she's not, her board isn't allowing her to go back, and therefore her insurance wouldn't cover anything and all that kind of stuff. So I think we definitely needed some very specific guidelines to tell us how to reopen safely. Right. And, and of course we're obviously smart enough to look at the CDC and the WHO, but a really good thing is should we be doing temperature checks, right? We've decided not to, but because we're not a hospital-based system, we're seeing relatively well people. You can be an asymptomatic carrier anyways, right? And I've talked to a bunch of physicians that basically say, Nicole, you're fine. But I had to go to my physician friends to make sure that was an okay thing that we didn't implement here, and I feel like there could have been a little bit better cohesive support for everybody during this time. The private practice section was decent at bringing out COVID related policies, but they didn't.
But it's only available to members.
Well, right. Exactly.
I don't have it.
100%. Right. And I just joined because I literally just joined not too long ago because I was finally let me change some shit about this stuff.
I know.
So, yeah.
Here's the thing. And I don't know whether you agree with me or not. It didn't matter, but it's I want to know what you think. Because for me, it's one, yes. I was a member of the PPS for 8 years. And finally I was my voice doesn't matter. I'm gone. And then, because I got things rejected, blah, blah, blah. I was I've got better time and better use to do some other things. Okay. So I feel what the APTA put out wasn't strong enough. It was very wishy-washy. Yes, it's protecting PTs because we're all essential, but right? Okay.
But it's not saying anything that's helpful for me,
as
in
a
my
business
situation.
Owner. Right.
Yeah, as a business owner.
Or even as an employee, what should I expect from my employer?
100%. That honestly, that I cannot tell you how many people I had reaching out to me being my employer is doing this, my employer is doing that. I don't agree with this. And I'm just there are no real guidelines. All I can tell you is that they're being a shit communicator right now. And that should at least be a thing. Because even when we didn't know what the heck we were doing, we were talking to our people every step of the way. We were saying I don't know. We had our therapists also look and try to help help make the policies so that everybody was sort of in the same boat, rowing the same direction. But it would have been nice to have some sort of an overarching association where you didn't have to be a member to know kind of what to expect.
I feel PPS could have said, hey, we have it. This is typically for members, but any private practice owner can see what we're doing and see what our members get. Because Aaron, I could come up with it. I'm not the smartest research-based therapist, right? It would cost me lots of time to go figure this out. And I'm going to create something, and I could share it with people, but the people that do this all day long should be the ones that say, hey, look, you don't need to go to the Dental Association or the Spa Association of America to figure out the best practices for reopening your business. Here's what we have.
Right.
Right?
Right. Okay. I 100%
I'm not crazy, right?
No, and to differentiate between the different types of clinics, I think that what they ended up putting out was meant a little bit of a half-ass thing, right? To encompass everybody. But how hard is it to please say what you think, what the guidelines are, what are the non-negotiables, what are the negotiables, right? If you are open right now, you should 100% be wearing masks, whatever, optional temperature checks. I mean, whatever the recommendations would be, wouldn't that have been amazing?
Yeah. But I also feel a marketer and an EMR company and, shouldn't be the ones putting out these guidelines.
Right.
It should be a research-based, I don't know. Anyway, so with that being said, I've had the hardest time feeling how can I open when I don't have a clear guideline from my association? Then my other piece is, how do I even open when I can't even get my hands on disinfectant?
Oh, totally.
So how have you, what are you doing in those instances?
Actual logistically. So this is a total sidebar and just absolutely 100% lucky that, so Jesse, my husband's mom, actually owns a hand sanitizer company that was actually not doing super great before this.
Wow.
frankly, and now is going great. So we actually have access to hand sanitizer like that, but we've actually had a hard time getting like a cleaner and like Sandy wipes, and we can't find Clorox wipes anywhere. So that's been more of a challenge. So we like basically just asked all of our staff, I'm like, bring what you have at home.
Yeah.
And we basically are like just mealing by.
Are you like cleaning the tables and face cradles after each treatment?
Yes, and all surfaces. And then we did stuff like take out the cloth. For people that can see, we can actually we have chairs now in our that we can actually wipe down. But we kind of prided ourselves too on being like this kind of cush,
right,
cash-based practice, and with like nice chairs and cloth and all this stuff. And now that's all in our other storage area for right now, because there's just no way to like disinfect that. So every surface that we have, so we're disinfecting all the tables. We're making sure that, and we have a laundry service that has medical grade, washers and dryers and stuff. So they're making sure to take all their stuff. So we're getting our linens from a place that supplies hospitals as well. And one of the biggest things on whether or not we could open was, do we have enough masks? So we decided, so we're not wearing N95s, right? Because I don't think that's necessary for the type of clinic we're at. So we're having everybody wear cloth masks, it's like BYOM, like that's so fun. Bring your own mask. And then we had to have extras here in case patients forgot theirs. So then we had a hard time finding surgical masks. We just happened to be able to, I think we just got lucky. We started trying to order them like a month prior, and it took forever to get here and stuff. And then, we have our laundry service company actually has ability to get that kind of stuff because they supply hospitals as well, but it's super crazy expensive. Right. So we're trying to avoid that if we can, but we do know that there's a backup there in case we really run into it.
It's kind of crazy. Like North Carolina right now, it's like the 21st, right? So this, our phase 2 starts on Friday night, and massage opens with other services like, with PT, we haven't been closed. We've been doing mostly telehealth, but right. We're at like 50% capacity, right? Our call volume's at 40%.
Yeah.
It's nuts. Yeah. But I guess my point was, I'm sitting here going, how can I open when I can't even clean inside my clinic? And it's kind of crazy. And yet people are going to open it, which leads me to believe that either they've got sanitizer somewhere or they're doing something different. So, and we can just get bleach and spray bleach down, but it would be really nice. Like I was saying, it'd be really nice to know, like, is that necessary? Is it necessary for me to do certain things and when? And I don't have guidance on it. And hopefully we've shedded a little guidance on it. Like, yes, we're supposed to. And, just trying to get all that stuff has been I've spent more time on little bullshit like that as a business owner than actually trying to figure out how do I serve my patients and get new patients in the door.
I cannot tell you how many hours we spent like actually looking at some scientific research and stuff on like how far respiratory droplets, like what is the grade of mass that we have, like, right? Because it's like, that's the point, right? To not have the respiratory droplets coming out. Right. So are these okay? Like, I think so. I hope so. It's just like, well, and the one thankful thing that we have to be really thankful for too, is that we're not in an area where it's super crazy scary, like New York or something like that. So we have the luxury of also being a little bit removed from a true, like, huge exponential growth in cases and stuff. We have seen the R value of the spread decrease in our region, right? So we can also be a little bit more confident, if you can be confident in the numbers with that. So we're just trying, but it's like, we're just trying to do the best we can with the information we have, and thank goodness that we have brains, but it would have been nice to have some other guidance,
Yeah, absolutely. So Nicole, what does like with pelvic therapy, like I know there's a couple different, as well as manual therapy, there's a couple different camps in different areas of pelvic therapy, right? So there's manual based. There's people need internal. There's people don't need internal. There's I'll do it when it's necessary. And then there's some people out there that never do it,
Yes.
and it, I think is, how do you navigate that? Because I know for me, like I don't do internal, but I help women with certain problems, incontinence, prolapse, pelvic pain issues, etc.
Uh-huh.
And most of it for me is education and breathing. And I
Okay.
can easily do that in video.
To,
But there's a lot of things that we're not a pelvic specialty practice, so we don't see all the more complicated issues, right? So how are you navigating those, and like which pieces are easier to work with on like maybe video visits, because some people listening to this won't be seeing patients in person and
right.
others will be, and doing internal, right?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Like people are like, I do internal and I can't do it, so I'm not doing any therapy. I'm like, but you can still talk to people.
Oh, totally. Well, and then there's the whole coaching aspect of our profession that I feel like
Mm-hmm.
people don't value or think that we know how to do, but both from a consumer standpoint and also like I think us as PTs, like don't forget, like that's probably the single most important thing that we do for people is have a third party for them, like come in and say, hey, look at this, we're assessing your entire plan
Mm-hmm.
from a we call it pelvic health foundations, right? From a sleep perspective, from a ergonomic perspective, from a movement perspective, from a stress management perspective, from a nutrition perspective. All of that stuff doesn't necessarily need hands-on care. In fact, most of it doesn't, in terms of the foundation. So that's one of the things that our clinic pivoted to when we actually had most of our current patients join a patient-centered Facebook group that we kind of already had, but then we really sort of put our foot on the gas with that. And we had a couple of really affordable online course options for
Mm-hmm.
patients that all dealt with the foundations of pelvic health. So we had a challenge in our Facebook group that was completely free, and then a relatively cheap option to do a whole movement course for pelvic health. So I feel like in this time, it's good to look at what kinds of things you can offer patients and what things you maybe should be doing and could be doing, but you don't have time to do that in your session.
Right.
And then see if those things can be translated in some sort of form of digital service. And for us, that happened to look like a Facebook group and online courses. And they went really well. We had and those things, every single thing that we pivoted to doing and spending time on is something that we can use outside of coronavirus, right? So now we can either sell that as a product to our patients, or we can decide what we're going to do with that in terms of offering that for our current pelvic sanity patients. As when they come in, if we decide to raise prices, that would be a good added benefit to have for them, that's quote unquote free. So I feel like that's another piece of advice that I have for anybody. If you're needing to pivot to something that isn't hands-on care, that make sure you're pivoting to something that you can sustain after coronavirus, because that's where it's going to be the biggest bang for your buck and the biggest bang for your time, effort, energy, and frankly money as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I see it for us. Like this has allowed me to actually finally finish my pelvic PT lead magnet.
Yeah.
I've been working on it for a while. I didn't have any time. I finally finished it, partly because we found a yoga studio that wanted us to come in and teach this stuff,
Ooh,
for their members.
yeah.
And now we've got it. And then like, oh, I can market that to anybody and see these people, on video, and they don't have to come see me in person for a big portion of what we're doing.
Totally. And then so for anybody, to go back to one of your other questions about what should somebody do if they want to serve this type of population, but they don't necessarily have the internal component, or they don't even want to do that, right? Is that I just would ask that everybody has some form of a screening protocol for when that would be an important evaluation or important piece of information to know. So that's sort of where I and I will go so far as to say that I don't think that you can say that you do pelvic floor therapy, right? If you don't actually have somebody that has that capability to truly assess the pelvic floor. Now, what I do think people can totally do is say that they are women's health athlete people that, and then list the things that you can treat. But the internal component is just as important to me as evaluating like every single part of a shoulder girdle. Like could you imagine, assessing a shoulder without looking actually at the rotator cuff like that?
Right.
It's like, that doesn't really, you're not getting the full picture. Sure, you can make it improvements, but are you really getting the full picture?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just asked that everybody has like some sort of a screening protocol for the people that would be appropriate for that. We created one called the Cozean pelvic floor dysfunction screening protocol.
Oh,
so
nice.
That's nice. So it's just a series of 10 questions, right, that you can ask your people. Can also help you to start asking those kind of like embarrassing questions that you don't really know how to ask your patient. But basically, if they say yes to 3 or more of those 10 questions, then it's 91% likely that they have some form of pelvic floor dysfunction. That would be helpful to have an internal assessment to see how much of an impact that pelvic floor is having on what their symptom presentation is. And for some people, it's like, you can, we just need to tweak this thing, and then you can go back to your therapist or whatever. And then, so we work really closely with some orthopedic practices here for that as well.
That's awesome. Where do we get that screening tool, or what are the top 3? What are the top 3 questions or
so
things
one
that
of the
we
most
would know?
interesting ones, so one of the most interesting ones is that do you have a history of fall on your tailbone, even into childhood, right? And then we ask like, how many times a night do you get up to pee? We ask about how many times you have a bowel movement a day, to screen for sort of constipation or straining, urgency, frequency of urination during the day, incontinence, and there's a couple of other ones on there. But that's on our website.
At Pelvic Sanity or?
Yeah, Pelvic Sanity publications section. Okay. There's like a screening protocol, and it was presented at the International Pelvic Pain Society meeting too. So that's good.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we'll put that in the show notes, as long as people editing the show remember. But we'll do that, because that sounds really awesome. If you could, I was looking at it. Maybe you just shoot me a link over to that.
I will, 100%.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Nicole, what do you think is like, what's the future of like PT, or even just specifically pelvic PT, now that whether it's the coronavirus is changing things or the internet video is changing things? Like, what do you see is happening in the next few months and years?
Totally. I think that ultimately this has taught us a couple of things, right? I think that just from a general pelvic PT or even just PT section is that one-on-one in-person care, I still believe, is the gold standard, if you will, but that there are certainly tons of other things that we can do to reach patients and provide value to patients with our expertise and knowledge. And so I feel like this is a big wake-up call for our profession, that we need to be diversifying our message to patients on how we can be helpful and effective for them. And if we don't go online and meet patients online in some form, some capacity, social media, Facebook group, online course, some way, then we're going to be left in the dust. And this is the time where we have to rise to that occasion and make sure that we are equipped to do that in a meaningful way, to carve out what we deserve to have, right? Which is our education and our expertise respected in the population. And so I really feel like this is a pivotal moment for us as a profession to have leaders step up and do that for people and have examples of what that looks like. Because your traditional, like, yeah, of course it's going to be great for one-on-one care, but that's not in person. But coronavirus has shown that is not always going to be the case where we can do that. And we don't know what else is going to come of anything else. And coronavirus isn't going away either. We're looking at this being an impact for at least a year, probably. Probably through at least this flu season and maybe even into the next spring. So it's not going to go away. So we can't just sit in our fetal position like we all wanted to at the beginning and hope that that's going to just go back to normal, because it's not. We're going to have to create our own new normal.
Right. Do you think we're actually stepping up as a profession like we should?
I actually do. I think I've seen a lot of people do that. I think that it's been good. I think that people are starting to learn and
Mm-hmm.
show what we can do, especially from a telehealth standpoint. What I do think would be really helpful is if I personally don't quite understand the state ridiculousness of that we can only do it in our own state. It's like, I wish we could just have a national sort of agreement that, like,
Right.
if you're a PT, I don't know if a PT in New York is any different than a PT in California. So those kinds of things, at least for digital stuff, should be, I don't know. There's got to be a way for that to happen.
Right.
And then that could blow up our whole profession and have it be freaking awesome that we can show our stuff to everybody else.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Well, that's awesome. Well, we're about out of time. Is there anything else you think would be helpful for people to know about what's been going on with you guys or anything else?
Gosh, I just feel like I would say this. I would say as a business owner, it's been particularly challenging. And I think that, you can never plan for everything, but you certainly can be better prepared
Mm-hmm.
for certain things like this. And being able to know your numbers and being able to project and ask your audience and ask your patients what they need and what they want and what they're willing and can do, that I think that that's been hugely valuable for us in order to plan what we're going to end up doing. So we're not just, shooting in the dark. It's that we actually have a targeted, as best we can, right? A targeted approach to everything that we're doing.
Right.
And also knowing now that we can't necessarily rely on past behavior metrics. Like, you better start now, like, looking at the patterns of behavior of your patients, which is essentially the consumer, and looking at the ways that they are consuming information now. And we need to be able to meet them where they are. And for us, we're lucky so far that that's been in person as well. That's bounced back, but that doesn't mean that we can just go back to how it was. We have to continue to push forward in some of those other
Mm-hmm.
markets and other areas too, in order for us to have a better diversification of our expertise.
Awesome. No, I totally agree. Well, that's so great. If someone wants to find out more about you, find out about the pelvic PT huddle, or, connect with you somewhere, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so I run a group of over 4,000 now, pelvic PTs, called the Pelvic PT Huddle. For all of the pelvic PT stuff, I have a new website called
Mm-hmm.
pelvicptrising.com. And then my clinic for any patient-centered information is also pelvicsanity.com. So feel free to reach out anyway there. The best place is either DM on Instagram, which is at Nicole Cozean DPT, or just email nicole@pelvicsanity.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Nicole, for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Aaron. I really appreciate this. And I hope that this, I know it's going to help a lot of business owners of everything that you're doing and helping. We're all in this together. So hopefully we can just continue to march forward.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on and spending time with us today. Thanks for coming to PT BizCon. In case anyone wants to see Nicole's talk on finding your ethos at PT BizCon, go to ptbizcon.com. But I really appreciate you being here. I look forward to seeing you in person sometime again soon.
I know. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Aaron LeBauer and Nicole Cozean. This is the Cash PT Lunch Hour. So go out, crush it. And don't worry about it being a little uncertain right now, because we're all in the same boat and we're going to get there together. Thanks.